Help if I turn that on. There we go. Now that Christmas is past and we're now even into a new year, there is some measure, I suppose, of relief that many children may be experiencing. Now, some of them are going to be thinking on the pessimistic side, which is to say that they are thinking, man, it's an entire year now until Christmas. Another 52 weeks until it's Christmas morning again. So some of them are thinking negative thoughts, whereas some others could be, or more appropriately should be, thinking or accentuating the positive. By that I mean this. Things are different now that we're after Christmas because kids are able to get some stuff now. Well, what do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. A few weeks before Christmas, I was going to Hobby Lobby to get something. And as I'm getting ready to leave, Philip says, hey, I'd like to go as well. There's this picture that I have been wanting to get a frame for that we've been talking about that for months that we just keep forgetting about. He said, how about I go and we'll pick out a picture frame. And so we go to Hobby Lobby and we look at all the frames. He finds one that he likes and we actually get that. We head to the car and we get in the car, we're driving home, and Philip says something along these lines about, this will be nice that when I get home we can put that together and we can hang it on the wall. And I said, oh, no, that's not how it works. Anything bought before Christmas you don't get until Christmas, because that's just how it works. And most of you, probably from your own experience or that with your children, can identify the fact that, and I know for me, it was around the time that you get to Halloween. Once you get to Halloween, between there and Christmas, you can't get anything. So, Mom, I don't have any underwear. I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait until Christmas. Mom, I need, my pencils are, I don't have any crayons. All my pencils are broken. I'm sorry, you'll have to wait till Christmas. Because it's like you're not going to get anything that you want until Christmas. Did you like that? No, but that's just kind of how it worked. That's just kind of how it works. You know, there's a lot of things that we experience in life where we may not like how it is, but we just resign ourselves to the fact that that's just kind of how it works. That's just how it is. Whether I like it or not, that's just how it operates. And that's true about a whole host of things, including this really big one, which is this. Change is an essential part of the human experience. You and I are going to experience change, and whether we like it or not, we understand that's just how it works. We are going to experience change in life. And it's not simply a part of life. It is, understand this, from the perspective of God, as what we see in the pages of Scripture, change is an intended part of the human experience. And so that leads us to this reality. Even though I may not like change, and some like it more than others, but in truth we all kind of push back against change, the fact that it's an intended part of the human experience, intended by God as a part of the human experience, is there anything that I need as a follower of Christ to do? Is there anything that I need specifically to know? That's what we're going to start thinking about today in a new series that's going to last us for the next, starting today for 4 weeks in January, thinking about this whole process and experience in preparing for change called I'll Do It Tomorrow. And today I want to think specifically about this question. Since change is an intended part of the human experience, what is it as a follower of Christ that I need to do? I want you to see how the Bible answers that question for us in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. If you would look with me there in your Bibles, we're going to look at the first 14 verses. If you can't remember how to find that, if you can find Psalms, so about the middle of your Bible, it goes Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. Don't go too far, you'll get to Song of Solomon, and I'll never be able to say anything more to you. You'll be, holy cow. Anyway, so Ecclesiastes chapter 3. This is what we read. There is an occasion for everything and a time for every activity under heaven. A time to give birth and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, a time to dance. A time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to avoid embracing. A time to search and a time to count as lost. A time to keep, a time to throw away. A time to tear, a time to sow. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. What does the worker gain from his struggles? I have seen the task that God has given the children of Adam to keep them occupied. He has made everything appropriate in His time. He has also put eternity in their hearts, but no one can discover the work of God, the work that God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and enjoy the good life. It is also the gift of God whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all his efforts. I know that everything God does will last forever. There is no adding to it or taking from it. God works so that people will be in awe of Him. Whatever is has already been. Whatever will be already is. However, God seeks justice for the persecuted. All right, so we have this passage, this text, and every text of the Bible has context. And I want you to step back with me before we delve into this and think contextually for a moment. We know, in fact, in verse 1 of chapter 1, we have the author identified for us. We're told that these are the words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Which of David's son is going to be the king in Jerusalem? Well, that's Solomon. And when you hear the name Solomon, if you've had any exposure to the Bible or any experience in church or Bible studies or listening to sermons, it's likely that there's a couple of things that stand out about Solomon in your mind. One of which is that Solomon loved the ladies, really loved the ladies. The Bible tells us that he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. You talk about somebody that's glad Christmas is over. That would have been Solomon. And so he's had all of these women that were part of his life. And so we know that about him. But perhaps the singularly biggest, most consequential standout thing of Solomon is this: that God effectively gave to him a blank check. He said, Solomon, I want you to name anything that you want, and I will give it to you. And Solomon did not ask for possessions. He did not ask for position. He did not ask for influence or power. He didn't ask for any of those things. Instead, what Solomon said was, Lord, I would want that you give me wisdom. And it was such a wonderful request that God gave to Solomon wisdom to a degree that He's never given to another person before or since. And so here, what we have just read in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, these are the words of a guy that is possessed by supernatural wisdom, that God has given to him insight and perspective that no one before or since has experienced. And as you read the book of Ecclesiastes, you find Solomon looking and observing the various facets of life. And it's like he's a student of living, a student of people, a student of circumstance. And in all of this, he is seeking to identify purpose and meaning. So we have all of that as context that leads us to deal again with our question, which is this: since change is an intended part of the human experience, what is it as a follower of Christ I need to do? Based on the wisdom that God gave Solomon, the first thing that we need to do is this: pay attention to the seasons of life. Pay attention to the seasons of life. Verse 1 says that there is an occasion for everything and a time for every activity under heaven. And I love how the King James renders it, that there is a season for everything. And starting in verse 2, Solomon begins to delineate some of these times or these seasons. And he goes through a whole stack of them. And we don't need to go through and explain all of them because the meaning is so evident. It is so plainly communicated that there is, for example, a time to be born. There's a time to come into this world and to be a baby. But there's also a time when we check out of this world. So that there's that time and that season. A time to plant and a time to uproot. So that could be to harvest or to be uprooting plants that it is past their time. There are times, there are seasons of weeping, at times for laughter and merriment. You understand that as he goes through this entire list, all of these different seasons of life. And very easily you could say, hey Michael, hey Solomon, I get that. I get that. In life there's all these various seasons. I just kind of know that. We all understand that. Now here's the challenge. Regularly in life as people, and more specifically as believers, it is not simply that we have information and that there are things that we know. Unfortunately, it is also the case that there are so many things that we know that we just don't keep on the front burner of our minds. Now, where am I going with this? Very simply, I want to say this. We understand and we know. I just said, we could all, there's a time to be born and a time to die. We know this. We understand this. Yet, when those seasons come, what so often happens? We're surprised. We're shocked. Well, and if we know it, how is it that we're so surprised? Well, it's because we're not paying attention to the seasons of life. That whole phrase, seasons or seasons of life, for whatever reason, I have been thinking a great deal about over the past year or so, and in conversations that Caroline and I have. Maybe God used her and using that phrase seasons to really just kind of stick in my mind. But I really started paying attention to the fact that there are such clearly delineated seasons in life. I think, for example, about my own experience. And so you've got your childhood years, your teenage years, and then there's this season where you've graduated high school and you've got some that are going off to college, some that are getting into the workforce. But then you enter that season after that where everybody's kind of getting going. They're getting their first home, their first apartment, their first real job, whatever it is. And there's this season where, among other things, you go to a lot of weddings, right? And so your friends are getting married, maybe you're getting married, and so you've got that season of life. And then there is this season of childbirth where you go to a lot of baby showers and friends are having children. And obviously there are people that are curve breakers on either end of it, but there's this kind of season. And then there is this season of life where you're beyond having babies and little kids, that you've got teenagers and kids going off to college, and then they are beginning to get married. We are, and I'm paying attention to this, that we are in a season of life where our parents are aging. In fact, and Caroline and I guess we hit this a little bit earlier with our fathers, that they have already passed, but we are entering a season of life where our parents are aging, and we're having to think about making sure that they are taken care of, and that their time is also limited. There's a season to come, hopefully, where my kids will finally get out of my house and that they will begin their own seasons and they'll start their own families. We become grandparents and great-grandparents and all of those. There's all of these seasons of life. We understand that. You know that. We all understand that, but we need to pay attention to these. Why? Because we understand that life is involved, it is intended, there clearly is a plan that is unfolding that has intended seasons that we are going to experience. So we come into them, we go out of them, some are longer, some are shorter, but we need to put that on the front burner of our mind. I need to pay attention to the seasons of life and to kind of see where I am in this. Why does that matter? Let me answer it this way. Very simply, so that we do not crumble, and so that our faith does not crumble when we experience the realities of change. If I know that it's coming, I tend to be okay when I begin to experience it. What does that mean? Think about it this way. I guess it was early in December. Nathan, he takes piano lessons with Karen, and there was a song that he was working on that he might be playing or was going to possibly play for church. And we've got a piano at home. It's a digital piano, but three of the keys, just very short order, just kind of all had problems, and I had to order some new keys. But if you've experienced the Postal Service lately, you realize. Dream on, Alice, you'll get to Wonderland someday. All right, so it took more than a month for these things to finally show up. In fact, they didn't show up until this past week. Anyway, he was needing to practice this song, but we had a piano at home that keys that you need are sticking. And so I was needing to run an errand on a Saturday, and he said, hey, would you mind dropping me off at the church and letting me in, and I'll just practice on the piano at church, and then when you're done, just come by and pick me up. I said, that's fine. And so I unlocked the door. I let Nathan in. He's actually here in the sanctuary. Nobody else is here. It's a Saturday. It's quiet. And if you've ever been at the church by yourself, sometimes it's a little eerie by yourself. But then Nathan's in here. He's got a phone. He's okay. He's practicing. unbeknownst to him, Nancy comes into the other side of the building for some reason. I don't know what anyway, Nancy comes in, and off in the distance, she hears music, and she decides she's going to investigate this. And she comes towards the sanctuary. She hears piano music. She looks in one of the windows of the doors and sees that Nathan is over here playing the piano. So very quietly, she opens the door. And how many of you remember Ric Flair? All right, so she gave him the Ric Flair woo, and I think we have since had to clean the piano seat, and but it scared him to death. Nancy said he screamed like a little girl, and he was absolutely petrified. He was petrified. Why? Very simply, because he didn't know that she was here. He had no idea that she was getting ready to come in. We get startled, we get all discombobulated. Why? When we don't know that things are going to happen. Intentionally, I have used the word intended. God has intended and made plain in His Word there are seasons of life, and you and I need to pay attention to the fact that we are going in them and out of them, so that as change begins to be experienced by us, we don't start thinking the sky is falling. It is part of our experience as a person. It's part of my experience as a follower of Christ. That's the first thing that we need to do. The second thing we need to do is this: discern between imposed and chosen seasons. Discern between imposed and chosen seasons. What does that mean? Pay attention to the list that Solomon gives of these various times and seasons. Some of them are in a category that I would describe as imposed. For example, he says that there is a time to give birth and a time to die. There's a time to be born and there is a time to die. You didn't get to I didn't just decide, I kind of like February the 18th of 1975. I think that's when I'll show up. That's an imposed season. And with respect to death, unless you take your life, you don't know when exactly it is that you're going to leave this world. You don't have any control over that. That is imposed on you. Now, it says that there is a time to plant, and in the scheme of things, you can plant, for example, at any time. I suppose you could go out in your yard right now and put tomato seeds. You can choose to do that. However, you can't choose the time that those things are actually going to germinate and grow. You do it now, it's just not going to work. Why? Because the planting season is an imposed season. It is not a chosen season. However, there is this other category. There is a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. There's a time that you can decide, I'm going to gather rocks right now, or I'm going to throw some. I'm going to search now. But then he said there's a time to count as lost, that it gets to be up to you when you decide, I'm going to say that it's not going to be able to be found. It is gone. There is a distinction between chosen and imposed seasons of time. And we need, as followers of God, to discern and determine the difference between them. Now, the problem is this: it's not always easy to tell. So I need to pay attention to the seasons of life, but more specifically, pay attention to which ones are imposed on me and which ones I get a choice about. But it's not always black or white, which category they fall into. So what do I need to do? Very simply, I'll illustrate it this way. The Monday before our Christmas Eve service, Jamie said to me, "Hey, what is it that what do you wear on that Christmas Eve service? Do you wear a jacket or anything?" I said, "No, typically I just wear a sweater vest on Christmas Eve service." And so why was he asking that? Well, the same reason we ask that type of question regularly. We want to know, is something more formal or not? Is it business casual? Is it casual? You don't know what it's going to be like, and so you're trying to prepare for it. And if you don't know how to prepare for it, what do? You ask someone who knows. All right, so if it is my responsibility as a follower of Christ to pay attention to the seasons of life, and if there are imposed seasons and chosen seasons, and it's not always easy to tell, what do I need to do? I need to intentionally ask one who knows. Well, who do you think that is? Well, obviously that's going to be God. God, I need you to help me to know right now whether this is a gathering time or a counting lost time? Is this a waiting season or is this an action season? I need your help to know what to do. I'm trying to pay attention to these seasons. I know that you are intending me to go through change, but I don't know what type of season this is and what I should do, so I need your help. Now, your responsibility is to discern, but understand you cannot successfully do this on your own. You've got to say, Lord, I need your help. Change is an intended part of the human experience. You need to pay attention to the seasons of life. You need to discern between the imposed and chosen seasons. And finally, you need to do this. Recognize your ignorance of God's unfolding plan. Recognize your ignorance of God's unfolding plan. There's so much that Solomon says here that I don't have time to appropriately deal with, but I want you to specifically notice two statements. One is in verse 11, it's at the end of verse 11. He says of God that no one can discover the work, the plan of God that He has done from beginning to end. So He's communicating that there is this work that God has been planning, that He's been doing. The problem is no one can tell for certain. They can't identify the beginning of it from the end of it. They don't know where they are in the chain. Am I towards the beginning? Am I towards the end? Am I in the middle? What exactly is going on? What's the big picture? In verse 14, he says, I know that everything God does will last forever. There's no adding to it or taking from it. And God works so that people will be in awe of Him. What I believe that he is communicating is this. Very simply, God is at work intentionally. I hope you know that. That starting in Genesis 1:1, when God created the heavens and the earth, that was not, didn't mean to do that. That everything God does, He does intentionally. And there is going to be, and there will always be a plan of God that is unfolding. The problem is you don't know fully. I do not know fully. Solomon, with his vast wisdom, did not know fully what the plan is. And so what does he do? He recognizes and confesses his ignorance of it. And in short, he essentially says, hey, what God is up to is bigger than me. What He is intending to do escapes my knowledge. I don't know all of the ins and outs. I don't know exactly how God is going to dot I's or cross T's or even create a new letter. I don't know. And why does God operate that way? In part because of verse 14 where He says, so that we might be in awe of Him. Because it's part of the process of God communicating that He is greater than anyone and greater than anything, and He is doing that which surpasses my pay grade. In short, it's part of the establishing the foundation for why it is that we worship Him. And we're saying, hey, you're greater than I am. I am aware you have a plan that's unfolding, but I'm also aware that I am ignorant of all of the details. Why does that matter? Why is that important? Over the years, I haven't done a ton of flying, but on a varied number of occasions, I have had to get on an airplane and fly to various locations. And those of you who have flown a little or a lot, maybe your experience has been similar to mine in that when you come onto a plane, oftentimes the cockpit door has been or may be open. And you may see the pilot and co-pilot, if there's a navigator, whoever is going to be in the cockpit. That door may be open. There's a stewardess or something obviously blocking the way. You're not going to be able to get in there. But you have a second or two to kind of peek in there. And I'm kind of nosy, and so I always kind of look in there. Or when you're getting off a plane, a lot of times the pilots have already gotten off the plane first, and they are headed to get on another plane to fly it somewhere else. And so the cockpit may be empty. And so, and especially if the line is kind of slow, I kind of look in there. If you've ever looked in the cockpit of an airplane, hopefully you've noticed there's an awful lot of buttons, like a stack of buttons. And let's be honest, most of them, they can't do it. They can't do anything. I think most of them are dumb. There's so many buttons. There's like just thousands and thousands of switches and dials, and there's computer screens, and I'm sure there's probably less now than there used to be in terms of all of these buttons and knobs. But there's so many different buttons and knobs, and all of these varied controls that are there. And as I see that, my awareness of that number has never aroused curiosity, where I have thought, you know what, I ought to see if I can figure that out. I mean, I see that, and I just say there's no way under heaven I would ever have any idea how to do any of those things. I wouldn't know what to do with any of that stuff. Consequently, when I am on the plane and we begin to experience turbulence, there's not a part of me that says, you know what, they ought to ask me what I would do. They ought to ask me to come up there and weigh in on this. What do I do? Having seen all those buttons as I'm feeling some turbulence, what do I say? I'm glad that pilot's got this. As the pilot says, hey, there's a storm that we're heading to, and so what we're going to do is to take it up 10,000 feet and hopefully bypass that. I don't say, you know what, I ought to go up there and just weigh in on that and look at those weather charts with them. You know, I've got the weather app on my phone, and I don't know, it says in the next 60 minutes. I don't do that. What do I think? I think I'm glad that they've got this. I'm glad the pilot has this. I'm glad that he knows what it is that we should do. Or if he says there's a storm, it's going to take us a little longer. We're going to go around this so that we don't have to go there. I don't think I need to weigh in on this, and they need my input. I say, I'm glad that they've got this. I'm glad that they've got this. What I'm saying is that my awareness of how big that is, all those controls, and my ignorance of it, what it leads me to do is to say, I'm going to trust this pilot. I'm going to lean on them and take confidence in the fact that they've got this. Why is it important for us to understand that there is a plan that's bigger than me and that's bigger than you? In essence, I think Solomon is kind of giving us a picture of, in very broad details, that the plan of God has a gazillion switches all over it. And you will have no idea, and have no idea, what all of them do and what exactly is supposed to be unfolding. So the hope is that you might decide, you know what? I'm glad He's got this, and I'm going to lean on Him. He doesn't need me coming in there and figuring this out and weighing in. Well, I think you ought to press the green one. He doesn't need that. Why? Because He's got this. I don't even know, with respect to His plan, I can't tell the beginning of it from the end of it. And do you know who said that? Solomon, a guy who had supernatural wisdom. And if Solomon couldn't figure it out, I'm telling you, Michael can't. I'm telling you, you can't. And why does God work that way? Why is it important for me to recognize and choose to articulate my ignorance of God's unfolding plan? It keeps me grounded. It keeps me in my place so that I am not prideful of my abilities. Rather, I am in awe of Him because He is unfolding a plan that involves change that I am, change that you are, change that we will experience. The encouragement is to say, thank you, Lord, that you've got this, and I'm going to lean on you. This is the first Sunday of 2021. My first opportunity to say that, and I butchered it. It's the first Sunday of 2021. I think January the 4th was the first Sunday of 2021. Think of all the stuff that we didn't know. Think of all that we were ignorant to. Not just related to the pandemic, but all the stuff that you personally have experienced in your life this past year. All of the change that you wound up experiencing. 2021 is no different. You don't know what's around the bend. You don't know the plan that's unfolding. God's encouragement, I believe from His Word, is I need to do my part. I need to pay attention. Change is coming. It is. It's an intended part of the human experience. And I need to prayerfully say, God, help me determine between that where I need to act and where I've got a choice and when I don't. And then to realize you've got a bigger thing going on than I'll ever understand, and so I'm going to lean on you. With respect to the change, that's what I need to. That's what you need to do. Will you bow your heads with me? As you look back on 2020, it's entirely possible that you might say that there have been a number of instances where you were kind of torn out of your frame because change came and you were surprised. A little further down the road, maybe at this point you'd say, you know what, I don't know why I was surprised. That's part of the season of life that I'm in. So I need God to help me to pay attention to that so that I don't come unglued as I go through change, because it's an intended part of my experience. As you go into a new year, there's going to be change that you will experience, some of which is imposed. Some of it you have a choice about, determining whether you should act, determining what type of season it is. I'm just telling you, we all need help. Help that you need to ask for, that you can even ask for beginning today. But in the end, all of this is part of the process of understanding how small we are, how big God is, so that we might be in awe of Him. My encouragement for you today is just to take a few moments, those of you that are followers of Christ, and say, Lord, change is coming. It is. It's inevitable. And I want to be doing what you called me to do this side of it, so that my faith doesn't develop cracks, so that I do not become unglued, and so that along the way I am intentionally leaning on and into you. If you're here today, or if you're watching online and you do not have a personal relationship with Christ, let me just tell you, we would love to share with you how you can. If you're here in person, please, will you talk to me afterwards? Will you speak to Jamie afterwards? We would love to share with you how you can experience it. If you're someone that's watching online, whenever it is that you're watching, would you reach out to us? Would you call us, email us, do something? Please reach out to us. I promise you, we will be glad to help you. And the decision that you make to begin a relationship with Christ is one that you will never regret, one that will bless you and help you to experience an abundant life now and eternal life when this season of time here on earth is ended. I want you to take a moment as we have some stillness just to talk to the Lord based on what He's saying to you right now.